right, welcome to another episode of Covered with the Utah FOP. I am Brett Rawson, your sometimes host. I've got some of the regulars in the room today. Actually, we've got Spencer in here from the Pod Mill, and it makes me very happy. Something about Spencer being here. Nothing against the kid, but something about Spencer being here. I just feel like we're in good hands. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I know you do.
Just feels natural.
It does. It does. We have president of the Utah FOP. That would be Mr. Kevin Murray in the house. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic. And, of course, Brent Jex, our executive director.
Did you forget?
I'm looking right at you.
Block.
Maybe we should have something on the wall with a whiteboard so we can keep it
name tags maybe next time. And over there in the corner is Travis. He doesn't always like us to point him out because we sometimes remind people about things, and but we won't talk about that this time. We won't bring up the phobias this time because
he hasn't seen that one.
Well, last time he ran screaming out of here. We mentioned the LPs, and he gets excited.
It's just a small problem to have.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? That was a dad joke.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I got it,
and I missed it.
You did. Yeah.
We'll have him play it back.
Tell yours. Tell your dad joke. I know you came prepared with one.
It was funnier last night.
Well, let's hear it. I'll be the judge of that. Go ahead. No, it's fine. If it's inappropriate, we'll cut it.
It'd be the same. I don't remember the other ones. I know there was something that I texted everybody.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Was that the one?
I don't know.
No, but that was funny.
Well, while he's looking for that, we are super, super excited to have our friend and neighbor from another state, Mr. Danny King, in the house. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. You look so relaxed now that you're retired. You know?
Hey, man. Life is good. I tell people, walk down the aisle at Walgreens and see all the medicines that you can get for medical conditions, and you recognize if you're there for a Band-Aid, like your problems are minimal.
Yeah.
You're doing okay.
You're doing okay. Yeah. Well, you're I don't remember when you retired. I've only ever really known you as a police officer from Henderson, Nevada, and you had an illustrious career there for how many years was it?
23 and a half, almost 24 years.
Almost 24 years, and we're involved in everything. I mean, you worked with, I know you were working with task forces down there. You were working with protocol stuff. You were kicking doors and saving babies and, all the stuff, and did it for a long time. I got to know Danny.
The former action guy.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think I have your action figure somewhere in a box. But no, I've known Mr. Danny King for several years now. Got to know him in his capacity as an expert. Sometimes in the legal business, we use experts, and Mr. King has been willing to come and opine, as they say, about certain aspects of our cases that deal with use of force, one of the very important things that we do at the firm. And we were super excited to have you on here today because there was an important case that made headlines in Utah and probably outside of the state, and had to do with canine units. Can you tell us a little bit about this case? And we're talking specifically about State v. Pierce.
And that's dogs for the layperson.
Tell us about it, Danny.
It was actually kind of an international case if you follow it. And these days with social media, people just love to repost things. So in Vegas here, we'll have articles about events that have happened throughout the world. Minor events that don't really mean anything because it just allows that TV channel to get more viewership and ups their ad revenue. And so immaterial of how consequential it is, you're going to see these things posted throughout the world. And it kind of became a big deal. And it started essentially in 2020 after a domestic violence incident. A officer a canine handler who was on that call did the right thing all the way through. However, as you see in modern times, it became political, right? And one thing that most people don't understand is allegations of excessive force rarely are actually because of an officer using excessive force. You could have timing issues, you could have just the optics of it, you could have the politics, and all those things are just as likely to be the case instead of unreasonable force. So this officer arrives on this call, suspect tries to escape out of a window, and ultimately when the officer is trying to put him in a position of disadvantage by telling him to get on the ground, the suspect won't do it. He will not do it. Well, to me, that tells me that he's trying to keep his ability to fight. The other thing that most people got hung up on, if you watch the video, is that he kept his hands up. And in policing in the United States and in the civilian world, people think that this is someone surrendering,
Right.
when in fact it's not, right? This just means there's nothing in my hands.
Right.
Like, you don't know whether I'm armed right now. You don't know whether I have any deadly weapons on, whether I'm going to punch you. You don't know any of those things. The only thing you know by this is if there's nothing in my hand. Now, if you tell me to get on the ground and I keep my hands up like this, am I surrendering? Am I actually giving up? No, not at all. Right. But people thought that all the way through the district attorney's office, so on and so forth. So ultimately what ends up happening is the handler ends up deploying the dog in a directed bite on the individual. And this suspect complies. The supervisor shows up, they do their investigation, the command does their review of the incident, and life goes on until this guy decides to retain an attorney. That then is that video was leaked to the media, and then the unfortunately it ended up becoming political at that point.
Right.
And it was just a bunch of people who didn't really understand police tactics, police use of force, from the police department to the district attorney's office, and unfortunately even to one of the most renowned canine trainers in the world. And it took us nearly 4 years to get that individual on the stand to figure out he had completely misapplied the law. Completely misapplied.
Really interesting.
Oh yeah.
Now that's super interesting, and you know, in thinking about this, we've said many times on this show that violence is never pretty, and when you're dealing with police tactics, and in the modern age when everything is either available from a body cam, or we've got passersby that, you know, break out their iPhones and start recording, we're seeing things that maybe historically we didn't see much of in the past. And we're seeing it at a frequency that, you know, it makes the novice believe that it's more frequent or more common, but always not pretty, always difficult to look at. And in this particular case, there were aspects of it, I think, that were difficult for the common person to view, a person perhaps in a jury. And it underscores the importance of experts showing up and describing what's taking place, why it's taking place, and what is customary and reasonable in the world of policing. And that's precisely what you did. But tell me, you said there's a world-renowned proponent of canine tactics that was there, and you took issue with his opinion about things?
Yeah, so he had made, based on my recollection, about 21 assessments as to what occurred in this event, and that's 21. So when you do an expert report, you have to render specific opinions, and you have to outline what those opinions are in detail, so that you can now go to the stand, and it gives the other side, our side, the opportunity to look and evaluate those things. So he made, that I remember, around 21 opinions. And when you dove into his manual that he wrote, and again, this person is world renowned.
Sure.
When it comes down to dog training, right? Technically, he is a law enforcement officer, but he's not out on the streets every day. So when you dive into that manual, only about maybe one of them is actually in the manual, right? And so it's a 1,300-page manual, and I'm looking at this thing, and he says things like a canine handler, if there's patrol officers present, a canine handler should act as a secondary backup and allow the patrol officers to give orders and get that person into custody. Well, that's not the case in the canine world, and it's not the case, especially if you are walking with a dog handler. The dog handler finds a suspect. The dog handler is in charge in giving the instructions. Well, the manual of this police department even says that. So here you have pretty much all the canine world saying, no, that canine handler is the one that's directing the incident. The manual of the police department says the canine handler is directing the incident. And this expert is saying that per Utah Post standards, that the officer should be handling the incident and the canine handler should be backing them up. But when you get into the manual, it doesn't say that. So out of those 21 opinions, I think there's maybe one of them, that's it, out of this whole 1,300-page manual that actually backs up what this person says. And no one ever checked them on that. No one ever said, wait a minute, you said all these things, you gave an opinion as to this, but it doesn't say that in your manual. So, Brett, if you read a report, it will cite the sources and cite the references and all those other things. Well, the first thing that I noticed in this report is that there are no citations. None.
Wow.
So then I have to comb through this thing and look at it. And what it comes down to is this individual said things that both weren't true and were not in the manual. And this officer paid 4 years because of this.
That's incredible. And I mean, and it's a significant allegation, and you're in a position to assess it and address it because you are also an expert. And have you worked with dogs in the past?
I worked from 2002 to 2008. I was a patrol dog handler out here in the Vegas Valley. Went through training with Las Vegas Metro. Did about 2,000 hours of training. But I was a handler. I wasn't a trainer.
Gotcha.
And while I was a pretty good handler, I think that if I understand the circumstances correctly, you have to understand this drug on for 4 years,
right,
for this officer.
Yeah.
Almost 3.5 years, 4 years. That I think that this expert is so highly regarded that I want to say that no one would take the case. Because number one, he was the expert on the other side, but number two, because of the way it looked, most people are like, that doesn't look good. Well, for the last 12 years, I've focused on the controversial stuff. Someone pushing someone, a cop pushing someone, officer involved shooting. That's not my deal.
Yeah.
I only deal with the ones that are controversial, the ones that people just don't understand, that look exceptionally bad. And this was one of those. It looks bad.
Well, and and in that regard, I mean, and I don't know if you're touching on this or intend to or not, but you've got an African American suspect, correct? And I've got the right case, don't I? You're looking at me like, are you crazy? You just said African American. Now listen, now we are on podcast here. And it used to be, I would say that we're pretty enough for the radio, but now we got video, and everybody's looking at us, and I don't know, can they see Danny? I mean, it's possible, Danny, that you are also African American. Possible.
It's possible.
Okay.
It's possible.
Yeah. Right. And so I'm wondering to what degree race was an issue in this case, and in the political aspect of an African American man being bitten by a canine unit with, in a place like Utah, in a place that might have less diversity than other places, if that played into it, or if you think that your involvement was significant, being an African American police officer with the history that you have doing the things that you've done as an officer? Did it matter?
So, if we're shooting straight with each other, you have seen a massive skyrocket of officers charged in the United States. And I think we can all agree, if an officer has done the wrong thing and it's criminal, they should be charged. Or if an officer has done the wrong thing and it's civil, they should be sued. That's the way the system works. No one has a problem with that, right? Or most people don't have a problem with it. However, I think we can all agree as law enforcement officers in the last few years that law enforcement has become more about social justice and reform than it has about law enforcement, right? When you talk to a cop or you talk to a police leader, very rarely do they talk about policing. It's all these other ancillary things about getting out in the community and establishing trust and all these other things, that it's not about policing anymore. However, I think you can also look at the number of officers that have been charged and fired throughout the United States and draw a correlation between the demographic of the individual that they were involved in force with. And that's just one of those things. So in my research, I have seen or concluded that, or noticed, I should say, there is a definite correlation between the race of the individual and whether an officer is charged or terminated for use of force. And as sad as it is, that's just one of the things that is present. Do I think it led to it in this case? Unfortunately, I do.
Yeah. And for the record, I want everybody to know that it was the Puerto Rican part of me that asked that question, just so that, in case I get, you can ask my mother more if you have questions about that part of my family. But anyway, always trying not to get canceled
Brett,
here on the show.
Are you undercover, or are you in a witness protection program? I've been meaning to ask, man.
Yeah, there are some issues here for sure. I grew a beard. I've got corduroy on. It looks like I found it under a bridge. I know.
Are you making pipe bombs in a cabin?
I forgot it was podcast day. I would not have normally.
You grew a beard last night?
Hey, I told you I'm Puerto Rican. We have good genes. Anyway, thank you for that. Now I'll try to clean it up for the next episode. But no, these are interesting realities that we deal with in law enforcement, and I mean, you were truly, and I'm not blowing smoke here. I mean, you were the hero of this procedure, this trial, this persecution, I want to call it, because unfortunately, this officer, he went through 4 years of hell, and it could have all been avoided. And what was striking to me about what was going on in Salt Lake City is that there was an attempt to dig into cases going back years. This wasn't like, hey, let's we have this terrible thing that we think happened and we've got to address it. There was an effort to dig into the archives and look for dog bites and to try to assess, in my opinion, is there someone here that we didn't charge that maybe we should have, for all the reasons that you've set forth. And I think that's an important element of this entire episode, that this was a solution looking for a problem, not the other way around. So. Yeah,
and unfortunately, there are several counties in the United States that routinely indict police officers. Hennepin County, LA County now. And on that list is Salt Lake County. So if you are a law enforcement officer in Salt Lake, especially having seen the way this whole thing went down, like, you should be concerned, and you should be training. One of the things that I always tell guys in my police department, our union was weak for many, many years. So I told our guys, go out and join the FOP, right? Because if you get in a jam, there are rock star attorneys, there are rock star use of force experts, and you won't see any of them if you belong to this union.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to get adequate protection, and this whole thing was cruelly expensive,
Right.
and the POA paid the bill.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you,
it was another organization, and some of the people involved were not FOP members, and and that stings when you get the bill, when you don't have the type of coverage we have.
Well, if you don't have the money up front, some people may not do it. It's one of those things that in my line of work, these cases happen every day, and I don't have time to stop, and I'll help where I can. But I'll tell you that if you are not a member of an FOP or a strong association, if you don't have money in your pocket to the tune of $100,000, you got problems.
Yeah, and I would say hundreds of thousands of dollars in some of these cases we've seen. Kevin, you're being pretty quiet over there. I mean, I know that
just taking it in.
I know that this bumps up against a lot of. There's a lot of things that are at home for you. I know you are with the Salt Lake City Police Department, and you are a K9 handler recently, right?
Yep.
Well, any observations about what's taking place here?
Danny kind of hit it on the head, because I didn't originate in Salt Lake County. And that was a concern when I left a pretty safe county to come down to Salt Lake County to work. And that was the parting thing that was told to me at my old agency was, hey, you're going down to Salt Lake County. Just hope you don't shoot a guy. And ultimately, coming down here to Salt Lake County and being involved in the FOP, that's the only way to work down here and feel like you are truly protected. Or if something does happen, that you're going to have people fighting for you and people with resources to fight for you. And so that's been one thing that we continue to communicate within Salt Lake County and specifically Salt Lake Police Department as these cases have arisen. But yeah, absolutely. I for one, Nick is a good friend of mine. And so, thank you for everything that you did on that case. The amount of relief that came over, not only Nick, but everybody else in the police department and that was involved in the case. We really appreciate all the hard work that you and the rest of the team did on that case. And so,
yeah, you saved his life. I mean, we talk about battles of the expert or the experts, and that's, what I understand this case to have been, and the good work that was done by the attorneys and everybody involved. But Danny, they could not have done it without you, and so we appreciate the effort that you put into that. It changed lives, it saved lives, and so we commend you for the nearly 24 years that you had in law enforcement, but also for the service that you continue to provide on and I won't say just on behalf of our brothers and sisters in blue. I mean, as an expert, you're going after truth. You're looking for the truth, and that's your objective. And so I realize that there's a neutrality involved in that, but for what it is, the facts routinely line up on the side of law enforcement, because we have in the United States of America the most highly trained and respectable law enforcement officers in the world, and that's just the truth. And I've traveled this globe, and I've seen how some things are done in other places, and we have the most professional, the highest integrity, the most capable law enforcement officers anywhere on the planet, and we need folks like you that can routinely point that out when it matters. So we thank you.
Hey, and Danny, if somebody out there listening is finding themselves in a case and they want to reach out to you for that assistance, how would they get in contact with you?
So probably the fastest way is go to my my website. On the patrol side, it's AmericanPatrolman.com, patrolman, MAN.com. Or you can reach me at ForceInvestigationsteam.com. And when it comes down to what happened in that trial, Officer Pierce was in the right, and I've been fortunate enough to review thousands of force incidents, and especially, like I said, the controversial ones. Of my 24 years, approximately 18 of them were on the street, and saw a lot, did a lot. But what's most important is that I saw lives destroyed for people being falsely accused of things.
Sure.
And that's what's kind of led me down that path. Now, with Nick, Nick is wired tight, and he wrote an excellent report. And so I know you guys would love to heap the praise on me, and I'll take it, and any money and any gifts that you want to send me. But the reality is that I saw in Nick a squared away cop who was doing the right thing. That was backed up by his report, and it was just an easy thing. So when I was on the stand or writing my report, I knew in my heart that he did the right thing, and it was backed up by my experience. It was backed up by whatever literature is out there, and based on my years of writing lesson plans, doing training, so on and so forth. When I dug into the case, I found out that case was as hollow as they come.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, having said that, we appreciate that you do what you do, because if you weren't here, I mean, I don't know, I've used you several times in cases that needed attention, and anyway, so yeah, I'll send you some money and some gifts or whatever. Come up with something. Come up with something. All right. Well, listen, we're towards the end. I know that we're going to put into the notes associated with this episode the way to get in touch with Mr. Danny King, an expert in use of force, nationwide or international. We'll call him international expert, because
international man of mystery.
That's it. These things have application all over the world. So if you're looking for an expert, need one in your case, Danny King is the man. So thank you, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Covered with the Utah FOP. We care about you. We know you're out there working hard. Stay safe.